Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
The French essayist Michel de Montaigne once said, "I think there is more barbarity in eating a man alive than in eating him dead."
Michel de Montaigne and the art of the essay.
The wisdom of it.
Montaigne invented essays. They're a great way to do philosophy.
What are you talking about? He digresses all over the place and contradicts himself.
Sounds like you don't understand what philosophy is.
You think I'm going to figure that out from Montaigne's essays?
What it is not is what you're learning to do at school in America today.
Our guest is Cécile Alduy from Stanford University.
The constant questioning of how much and how little we can know is the philosophizing that's going on in the essays.
Montaigne and the art of the essay.
Nothing fixes a thing so intensely in the memory as the wish to forget it. Michel de Montaigne.
Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
Are essays a good way to do philosophy?
What if they're full of digressions or contradictions?
Could that make them even more philosophical?
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Josh Landy.
And I'm Lanier Anderson, sitting in for Ray Briggs. We're coming to you from our respective homes via the studios of KALW San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that begin at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus, where Lanier teaches philosophy and where he and I co-direct the Philosophy and Literature Initiative.
Today, we're thinking about Michel de Montaigne and the art of the essay. You know, Josh, Montaigne actually invented the essay back in the 1570s.
Yeah, and those essays he wrote, they're pretty amazing. They get you thinking about so many different things. But, I mean, they're not really philosophy, are they?
What do you mean, Josh? They make you think, and they make you think about interesting things. Isn't that what this show is supposed to be about? And they're about all kinds of philosophical themes. You know, knowledge, morality, the confrontation with death. What's not philosophical about that?
Well, they're a mess. I mean, the guy starts out talking about the limits of our knowledge, and the next thing you know, he's telling you about his thumbs.
That's all deliberate, my friend. As Michel says, it's the inattentive reader who loses my subject, not me. So it's all your fault, Josh.
Oh, right. Yeah. Blame the reader. It's not my fault he can't keep his story straight. Plus, he's always contradicting himself. I mean, one page he'll say philosophy is all about learning to face death. And then a few pages later, he'll say you can't learn to face death.
Come on, Josh. It was a few hundred pages later. But anyway, contradiction is the lifeblood of the essay.
It's the what?
The word essay literally means attempt or tryout. Montaigne invented the form precisely so he could try things out, stuff he wasn't sure about. He said it himself. If my mind could gain a firm footing, I would not make essays, I'd make decisions.
Okay, that is a good line. And trying things out, that's great. But how is it doing philosophy?
Man, you have such an impoverished conception of philosophy.
Okay, smarty pants, enlighten me.
Look, I'm with Montaigne. Philosophy isn't just about coming up with true beliefs. It's about living well. You can have all the best beliefs in the world, but if you're living like a boor or a tyrant, then it's totally pointless, or even worse.
Okay, yeah, I accept that. But look, here's my question. How on earth is a massive digressions and contradictions going to help us live better? I mean, can't we live good lives by reading things that are clear, things that are consistent, things that stick to the point?
No, because that's not going to help you be a skeptic or a good skeptic like Montaigne was. He realized just how hard it is to know anything, and also how dangerous it can be when you think you know more than you actually know.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the folks around Montaigne in France in the 16th century, they were so certain they had it exactly right about which version of Christianity was the right one. They were running around slaughtering each other in the millions. I mean, that does seem to be a case where being totally convinced you have the right beliefs is dangerous.
Right. And that was just about which version of Christianity. I think he's totally right that we need at least a measure of skepticism to counter that kind of lethal overconfidence. That's why the essay form made so much sense for Montaigne. He thought, let's be humble about what we can know and cautious about upsetting the whole apple cart of society based on our pet ideas. So instead, you should use your writing to remind yourself of just how confused you are, just how little you actually know.
You know what, Lanier? That's actually pretty neat. And Montaigne really did turn questioning everything into an art form. A questioning that got him to some pretty impressive places for his time, like the equality of women, the stupidity of religious wars, the barbarity of imperialism.
Finally, Josh, you're getting it. Philosophy is all about the questions, not the answers, just like Socrates said all along.
See, maybe I don't have such an impoverished view of philosophy after all.
Okay, I think I might have heard something from you before about that. So I guess you don't. And neither does our guest, Cécile Alduy, who's an expert on the French Renaissance. Cécile has written about Montaigne, and she's also an expert on political polarization today. So she's the perfect person to talk to about Montaigne's essaying, his philosophy, and his politics.
So who was this Montaigne fella anyway? We sent our roving philosophical reporter Holly J. McDeed to find out. She files this report.
Michel de Montaigne is just, wow.
Rob Zaretsky is a professor of history at the University of Houston. To him, Montaigne is someone he wishes he could have a beer with.
He talks about textiles. He talks about the earth. He talks about food. He talks about, forgive me, about defecating. He talks about sex. He just loves earthly things.
Montaigne is known as the man who invented the essay. So of course, he had a lot to say, and people have a lot to say about him. But Zaretsky thinks we still don't really know him.
And just as we really don't know him, if we were to do what Montaigne did and take a long, sustained look at ourselves, we don't know who we are either.
But if nothing else, we can at least begin with some basic biographical facts. Montaigne was born in the Aquitaine region of France in 1533 and grew up on a wealthy estate speaking Latin. As an adult, he served in the Bordeaux Parliament and became very good friends with the humanist writer Étienne de la Boétie.
Montaigne really describes it as a perfect friendship.
That's Pierre Force, a professor of French and history at Columbia University.
There was mutual admiration, but there was love.
Montaigne's friend died in 1563, just a few years after they met. In 1570, Montaigne decided it was time to retire.
And he dedicated his life to reading and thinking and meditating. And that's when he started writing the essays.
In his younger years, Montaigne was obsessed with death. But when he fell off a horse and nearly died, his mindset changed.
He essentially saw himself dying, and then he saw himself coming back to life. And as a result, he was probably less stressed or afraid or obsessed with the idea of death than he was in his early years.
While surrounded with his own thoughts, he learns that the people of Bordeaux had elected him mayor.
He apparently, did not lobby for that position or anything like that. They just elected him.
And he did such a great job that he was elected again. Montaigne lived during an extremely turbulent time, and the world threw a lot at him. At one point, he had been asked to act as an official mediator during the vicious war between Catholics and Protestants. In the essays, he talks about almost getting kidnapped and ransomed at his house. Still, he just wanted to meditate and write.
Looking into himself, taking care of his own mind, his own heart.
But staying in one place was not easy. In 1585, Montaigne learned the plague had arrived in Bordeaux. Rob Zaretsky from the University of Houston says Montaigne hit the road with his family, and in one of his essays he describes wishing he could run from himself.
The point to living is not to rehearse one's dying for Montaigne. Now, in the wake of the plague, the point to life is to live.
So Montaigne lived, and he wrote and wrote and wrote. He lived an unusual life in a frightening time, and spent a lot of it trying to get to know himself better. After all, as he would say, even on the most exalted throne in the world, we are only sitting on our own bottom. For Philosophy Talk, I'm Holly J. McDeed.
Thanks for that fascinating and really informative report, Holly. I'm Josh Landy. With me is my Stanford colleague, Lanier Anderson. And today we're thinking about Montaigne and the art of the essay.
We're joined now by Cécile Alduy, She's a professor of French literature and culture at Stanford and the author of The Politics of Love, Poetics and Genesis of the Amours in Renaissance France. Cécile, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Hello. Glad to be here.
Cécile, you work on all kinds of fascinating stuff, from 16th century poetry all the way to 21st century political discourse. So what first got you interested in Montaigne?
Well, to be honest, when I was a student in France, I got, to read Montaigne, and I was not really caught up with, being like, I didn't think he was the best guy. But many years later, and even after having taught Montaigne in courses at Stanford, I got a pretty bad case of carpal tunnel syndrome where my hands could not function for 2 years. And this is where I discovered Montaigne wrote a small essay called On Thumbs. And I, thought, a guy who thinks that writing and thinking about your hands is important, that's my guy.
Your guy. That's excellent. So, Cécile, this literary form that Montaigne invented, what is it? What makes something an essay in the Montaigne sense?
Well, what it is not is what you're learning to do at school in America today, which is the 5-paragraph essay. An essay, in Montaigne's sense, is really a writing process that seeks to, as you said, try out ideas, including contradictory ideas, honestly, sincerely, without necessarily having a preconception of an answer to the original question. So it's a roundabout way to circulate from idea to idea, topic to topic, to come to a sense of what the subject, and it's a really important thing, the invention of subjectivity through writing, what the subject can know about this, looking at books, looking at examples, looking at his or her own life, and rounding it up in a form that is open to further questioning.
So let me pick up 2 themes that you highlighted and get you to dilate a little bit on why they're important. So one theme you highlighted is that you should go round and round and that the essay should digress. Why is that important? And the other theme is, why is there an honesty rule? Why do you have to say what you really think?
So the digression is a consequence of honesty, because the writing of the essay in Montaigne's sense and practice is the thinking process itself. It's not stream of consciousness. There is some drafting and rewriting going on, but it has to be transparent about its own shortcomings. And so instead of being a philosophical system where you present, like Leibniz, arguments and through deduction arrive at a system of the world or metaphysics or what have you not, Montaigne is interested in how we know what we know, if we know anything, and how we think. And how we think is, coming to your second answer, being from a specific perspective, from a point of view, in a body, at a certain time, in a certain situation, and within a cultural system. And so he is one of the first authors to pinpoint the conditions of thinking as intrinsic to how much we can understand and how modest we have to be about what we can know.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today we're thinking about the 16th century essayist Michel de Montaigne with Cécile Alduy from Stanford University.
What makes the essay such a great vehicle for doing philosophy? How can writing essays help us recognize our limits, embrace other cultures, and become who we are?
Skepticism, style, and the self, along with your comments and questions when Philosophy Talk continues. If the book you read was full of digressions and contradictions, would you sing about it? I'm Josh Landy. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Lanier Anderson, sitting in for Ray Briggs, and we're thinking about Montaigne and the art of the essay with Cécile Alduy from Stanford University, author of Montaigne and the 29 Sonnets of Etienne de la Boétie, from composing poetry to composing essays.
No essay needed about COVID. Unfortunately, we're still pre-recording episodes from the safety of our respective homes, so we can't take your phone calls today, but you can always email us at comments@philosophytalk.org, or you can comment on our website, where you can also become a subscriber and gain access to our library of more than 500 episodes.
So, Cécile, Josh and I were arguing earlier about whether Montaigne's essays really count as philosophy. I, of course, was right.
I think you were.
Is there a philosophical value to writing the way he did, in your opinion?
Well, I think, the same question would apply to Socrates, who is one of the models for Montaigne. So the constant questioning of how much and how little we can know is the philosophizing that's going on in the essays. I think that, it is, for me, it's a literary form as much as philosophy. And I always think he's a writer more than a philosopher. If you take philosopher as someone who builds a system of understanding everything, Montaigne thinks in metaphors. He thinks through his body. He thinks through his age. He thinks the way we all think, which is not as abstract minds, but as embodied persons, and from a very specific situated position. And this is philosophical in and of itself. I think Montaigne is one of the first to have invented modern subjectivity as we know it, the sense that we are not just rational minds, but people with histories who change in time, whose I is not the same 20 years ago and 20 years after. So I think that this embodied knowledge through thinking and through writing is very much philosophical. It's also a lot of wondering and curiosity about the world in all its facets, from, very foreign lands to watermelons.
Yeah, yeah. So he says that this way of writing, this form, actually reveals who he really is.
Right.
How does it do that?
Yeah, so he has a famous line where he says that I did not make my book as much as my book made me, because the book is consubstantial to its author. And the way to understand that is the process of writing, because of this fundamental principle of honesty and saying as much as is legal at the time. This principle of authenticity and honesty with oneself and going deep into oneself means that it's the writing act that reveals what's inside. It also reveals that one changes with time. Not only because in the moment one think back at who we were in the past and who we are now, but also because Montaigne comes back to his writings again and again, and he reads himself again and add a paragraph or 3 words and compares who he was or what he was thinking to who he is today and what time has brought him in terms of maybe not wisdom, but maybe more doubts, actually. So this process, which is in time rather than a fixed, abstract, atemporal system of things, is much truer to reality, or to the human experience, at least.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there, and I also love the way that Montaigne's thinking about the role of writing, because you can imagine, why don't you just sit in your room and think of all these thoughts to yourself, right? Why not just, or talk to a friend or something like that? But he's really thinking really hard. What's the additional value of putting it down on paper? In a book that, as you say, he keeps coming back to, but he never cuts anything. And he says, that's because I don't want to cheat. Right? This public declaration obliges me to keep on my path. So he writes it down, he circulates it in the public. And so he can never pretend that he always thought the way he's thinking now or something like that. I love this way of thinking about the value of the actual written word.
Right.
How do you see this?
Well, there's another thing that's very philosophical about it is whether we're thinking outside of language or not, and whether we're thinking outside of language intended for some kind of audience or not. The preface of the essay pretends that he's writing just for his family so that they can know him after his death. At the same time, he's going to publish like 3-volume, edited and republished like many, many times. So he had this intention of reaching a wider audience. So I think that, I mean, this is why I love him, because for me, it's literature as much as philosophy, meaning that he thinks in the language. He cannot dissociate an abstract system of thinking that will be just in your head, as if you had this pure reason working itself alone, and engaging with others, the readers he will have, but also him reading authors. And, you mentioned you could talk to someone to think through your things. Well, this is what he does in the essays. He's constantly talking to dead authors, to companions like La Boétie, whose memory he's, eliciting again and again. So the essays are conversations with oneself, with other writers, with the fragments of quotations that he embeds in his writing. It's certainly not a lonely process.
Yeah, so you've been pushing on this idea that it's really philosophical because he uses it to form himself and fashion himself and create a work that, as you put it, is consubstantial, or he put it, is consubstantial with its author. And you might think that if the whole thing is about self-exploration through conversation, the way you were just suggesting, that he would be talking about himself all the time. But as you also pointed out, that's not what he does. He doesn't talk about himself. He talks about thumbs or smells, or whether you should go out to parley with the besieging army outside your city, or cannibals, or whatever, right? So
imperialism, lots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does he get it himself by talking about all those other things?
Yeah, the preface is this total trap to the reader, like, come see myself, and then you open the book and it's not at all about his own, subjectivity for a long time. Because actually, thinking about the world, thinking about others, is still thinking from one's mind. So the thinking thing brings the self into contact with the outside, if you wish. So even when you're doing an essay about doctors and medicine, or fathers and sons, the subjectivity of the writer, because there's this honesty embedded in the reading contract, comes in or shines through or leaks through in the writing itself. And conversely, what he was also implying is that the subject is not interesting because he's wonderful, he's just a great guy, but just because he is as everybody else. He is just a human being. And so he has this other quote, which is, every single person holds the entirety of the human condition within him or her. And I think that's what's valuable about his book. It's not about the ego, it's about the self as self.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're thinking about Montaigne and the essay with Cécile Alduy from Stanford University. And we have an email from Dana in Lake St. Louis, Missouri. And Dana says, could you discuss how philosophers might benefit from returning to Montaigne's stylish essay form? We have grown dry as dust, and he is so engaging and lively. What do you think, Cécile?
I could not agree more. This is why I'm not a philosophy person, but a literature person. I think that we think in images, we talk in images, we understand the world in images as well. And this is what Montaigne says and writes. I do agree that philosophers would gain a lot in trying to translate the abstract reasoning into concrete applications, and have this constant back and forth between the experience and the abstraction that Montaigne is doing. Because it's not like he's just like, chit-chatting about things. Actually, he's taking examples and trying to see, so what can we deduct from this? Maybe nothing, because it's contradicting with something totally different on the other side. But he's trying out the mind with different examples or writings or statements, and seeing how we can make sense of them either together or opposing them one from another. And this is thinking. And what I love about it is that if you want to follow his writing, you have to think yourself. You cannot just like take a statement, take it out from the book, and oh, I know Montaigne. I know what he means. You cannot extract from the writing itself as quintessential, philosophy. You have to read and think the book through.
I love that. Yeah, and maybe it connects to something that Lanier was talking about a little earlier on today about the different kinds of philosophy that are out there, right? There's one kind of philosophy that's all about, having the right beliefs, thinking correctly. Another kind that's all about acting correctly. And if you want the second kind, maybe a book that isn't a treatise is better for you. I mean, Montaigne himself said something about books, used books more for exercise than for instruction. And he sometimes he likes to read books just for the style, not so much the subject matter. What do you think? Do you think this is true of us too? Like, we can go to Montaigne not so much to learn what thumbs are or why thumbs are useful, but to meet Montaigne and to sort of intuit him through his fascinating style and maybe to exercise ourselves, like you were saying, Cecile. We have to work, we have to do something. And is that work itself philosophically important? Are we doing something that helps us live a better life?
I think that thinking and doubting is always important. And what I love about Montaigne, and there are other authors like that, is that you have yourself to engage into this cognitive process that suspends certainties, that suspends dogmas, and forces you to really think honestly outside of the bounds of what you're used to do. And so for me, it's really, reading Montaigne, like writing the essays for Montaigne, is a cognitive process, almost like a meditation in thinking, where you're practicing new neural connections. You're expanding your brain by putting together things that you're not used to put together and confronting ideas that we're not trained to align in the same paragraph, for instance. So it's this, he has a phrase, he says that he likes a poetic allure, as sauts et gambades, where you're jumping around. And so this jumping around, which is so not conventional, is immensely productive way to get outside of our cognitive bubbles and our habits of thinking.
Yeah, and one of the main cases where he forced his contemporaries to think outside the box in that kind of way is the famous essay on cannibals. And I always thought, in a way, the whole thing grew out of the joke at the end. He spends all this time praising the bravery and the resilience and the virtue of the Native Americans. And then at the end, he says, well, but what can we do? They don't wear pants, so there's nothing to be done with them. And by opening the whole essay out of that closing joke, he sort of tried to force his contemporaries to re-see the Native Americans as genuine humans with virtues to admire and things to teach us, and
better
really
people
shake
than them.
Yeah, better people than them, and really shake them out of their complacency as Europeans.
Yeah, and what's really remarkable about the essay is that it's exactly what I was describing. It forces you to think even the meaning of words differently. So he takes this word barbarian and kind of travels with it along different lines of thinking. So first, okay, the cannibals, they're barbarian. Yeah, but only in the sense that barbarian are the ones that are just not like us. Like, the Romans were barbarian for the Greek. Oh yeah, and they're barbarian because, they live close to nature. So they're really close to nature. But is that bad? And so then you have a few paragraphs about how being close to nature is probably better than being in our artificial societies where brothers are killing each other. And then, and not only they're really close to nature, but okay, they do have this habit of cannibalism. But what did we do? Just like, yesterday, we killed each other. There were rumors that in Paris during the civil wars, people would go and unearth cadavers to eat them because there was this famine. So he's constantly forcing us to rethink even the meaning of the word barbarian, which is, the other, basically, for us today, and put images that are new to this word, including our own faces on that word. We are the barbarians. So, if you travel with him reading through the cannibals, you've changed entirely in your mind the meaning of the word barbarian.
Yeah. Cecile, we've got an email from Jeff in Williamstown, Massachusetts. And Jeff says, is Montaigne's way of making thoughtful judgments without obsessing over certainty a good model for the 21st century, given our current crises of knowledge?
Yes, I think it is. If you think of how much troubles come from people holding really firm on ideologies that they think are truth, and how it prevents any civil dialogue or deliberation, how it can have very serious consequence on even how we might be able to live on this planet, going forward. Having the sense of constant doubt obliges one to be open to not only contradiction, but to learning from others, and to learning from science also. So it's not doubting everything, but
Right.
mostly doubting yourself and your ability to have a secure truth that's not tainted by just very relative cultural position.
Yeah, that's great. And maybe some doubt in whatever conspiracy comes across your Facebook feed. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today, we're thinking about Montaigne and the essay with Cécile Alduy from Stanford.
Who do you think is writing the most interesting essays today? What do you look for in an essay? Do your favorite essayists help you live better, a more authentic, a more tolerant life?
The slow art of the essay in an impatient world. Plus commentary from Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher, when Philosophy Talk continues. Surely today's essayists publish more than unreconstructed rubbish. Could we call upon the authors to explain? I'm Josh Landy, and this is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Except your intelligence. I'm Lanier Anderson, sitting in for Ray Briggs. Our guest is Cécile Alduy from Stanford, and we're thinking about Montaigne and the art of the essay.
Cecile, we've got an email from Tim in Portland, Oregon, and Tim asks whether Montaigne has any equals today. What are his essays most similar to? Something in the Atlantic or New Yorker, or maybe Reddit, Twitter, or even Wikipedia? Who is the Montaigne of today?
That's a great question. There's only a few writers in the New Yorker who qualify as, new Montaignes. I really like Adam Gopnik, but I'm thinking of other authors that made a similar influence on me because of the same qualities that Montaigne has, and in particular, Susan Sontag in her book, Metaphors of Illness, because you have the same combination of a very subjective point of view where the essay is rooted in lived experience, but to question how this experience has been put into words or denied, or how language can even help us make sense of it, or if there is the possibility to make sense of illness in general. And that's very similar to essays trying out words and trying out ways of thinking things that maybe are outside of the realm of what we can comprehend and, put into a little box.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, something that comes to mind for me is Roxane Gay. I mean, this kind of combination of the personal and intellectual. But I think for me, the biggest thing that comes to mind, not the biggest, but the closest comparisons, what I meant was David Foster Wallace, because, right, he has footnotes to his footnotes, right? So there's like personal and intellectual, there's the digressions, there's the retractions, there's the kind of skeptical acknowledgement of ignorance. Do you see that kind of kinship there?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the digression feature of Montaigne's essays is harder to find nowadays, just because editors have much more power than in the past. And so publishers are reluctant to allow something that looks like a draft to be published. I think that blogs, probably because you can go back in time and write something entirely different on the same topic, a few years later, would probably be a form that Montaigne would have embraced.
Yeah, that's what Andrew Sullivan actually claimed, that part of his pioneering work in political blogging was inspired by the way he read Montaigne. So I think that's a great observation. But I'd like to actually go back for a second and invite you to expand a little bit on Josh's call out of Roxane Gay, and another person who seems similar in concern with the body and ecstatic states is Gia Tolentino. And there really has been an explosion of great writing in the feminist first-person essay in the last few years. And Montaigne himself was a little bit of a proto-feminist. And I wonder if you have a perspective on that, Cecile.
Yeah, I would qualify a little bit his proto-feminism. I mean, I don't remember now how he put it, but
Well, he says males and females are cast in the same mold.
Yeah,
And
so-
he quotes Antisthenes as eliminating a distinction between
yeah,
women.
yes, that's true. But he, in his chapter on three commerces, he's very fast about the commerce of women, saying, yeah, well, I spent some time on that and didn't bring me as much satisfaction as conversation and books. So he can be pretty blunt about,
Right.
and in his own life, I mean, he spends a lot of time talking about his friends, his father, a little bit his son, his wife Zero. And so I think he was a proto-feminist in the sense that he looked at the education of girls and women and the restrictions on their condition and, called the bluff and said, why are they not able to read about sex when actually the taboo on sex elicits more curiosity on their part than being able to be open about it. And they know more than we do anyway. So, I mean, of course, like with everything with Montaigne, you have to replace it in his context. But I think that creating a form where the subject as an embodied person with, all the frailties and particularities of being in one body, that opens a space of literature for anyone to inhabit and take for themselves. So it would not be surprising that the essay as a form that's so free, would be a great vehicle for the feminists of today.
Yeah, so regardless of whether Montaigne himself got all the way there,
Right.
these other people can pick it up. I'd love to hear your further thoughts on Gopnik too. So I had this reaction to one of Gopnik's pieces. I don't know if you saw his review of Philippe Descens' huge magisterial biography of Montaigne, but that biography makes Montaigne out to be, writing because he's kind of compensating for a failed political career or something like that. And I really felt like Gopnik wrote a very harsh review of that biography, and it felt kind of defensive to me, like Gopnik was insisting something like, you can't say that about my friend.
Right.
So how does Montaigne create that effect that he makes us think that he's our friend?
Well, one thing is that different personalities can take different things from Montaigne. So, for instance, I see him as a poetic writer, and maybe you see him more as a philosopher. But the work is so rich, and his presence is both very humble and at every corner. So you get to really know a mind thinking through his own failings, narrating how his body is so heavy and giving him all sorts of sorrows. So there's this intimacy that emerges. And I just wanted to just pinpoint that it's very new for the time. At the time, literature is about imitation of great authors. So you're supposed to, if you're a poet, you're supposed to be like Petrarch or, Ovid, but you're not supposed to write about yourself, actually, even if you say I. So the fact that Montaigne is able to create this intimacy and talks so wonderfully about friendship, of course, maybe accounts for how close the reader feels to the author.
So this brings me to a question I have for you, Cecile, because we've talked about how he contradicts himself. We talks about change, but at times he'll also talk about how he's managed to kind of construct himself. He's made himself into something. He talks about everyone having a ruling pattern inside them, some kind of essence or something like that, a deep character. And then he'll quote people like Seneca saying wisdom is always to will the same things and always to oppose the same things, and there's something really important about achieving a kind of stability. So where does he end up? Does he end up just kind of a mess, where he started, and that's good? He's conflicted, he changes across time. Or is there a way in which he's kind of produced something kind of stable that
Well,
we
yeah.
relate to with our friend Montaigne?
Well, he creates this work, which is stable because it's finished at this point. But also he creates a complex image of the self, and I think this is what's so rich about it, is that instead of having, even if in a novel you would have a portrait of the characters at the beginning, an introduction, and you get the physical, the moral portrait, and it's couched in words that pre-exist the character and that are supposed to make sense, in a very definite way of the complexity of the being that's in question. But Montaigne does not put adjective to himself. He shows himself in the writing. And so he's not going to say, I am this or I am that, but across time I've been this way and that way, and on these kind of occasions I'm rather inclined to do this, and I can also be this. But so you have the entire palette of being in action in the world that's evoked, which is a very different thing than just contradicting yourself in terms of, I had this idea, now I have this other idea. So there is a Montaigne that exists through the essays, who is really like a person, that you get to know, with rumbles about certain things and is obsessed about specific kinds of errors that he finds really trivial, and has this kind of irony, and but it does not preclude acknowledging doubt and inconsistencies at the same time.
Yeah. So there's this passage in one of the chapters that I just love, where he compares himself in a way to a harmony in which we don't hear just the flute or the spinet or the instruments separately, but they all come together into a harmony. And we get that sense from him individually too, that, he might be changing all the time, but somehow those things all come together into a harmonious personality. He focuses on change in himself, but he wasn't so enamored of change in the society. So another thing that he's famous for is, advocating for sticking to the old customs. Right. And I thought you would have quite illuminating, important things to teach us about that part of Montaigne.
Yeah, that's the kind of a paradoxical thing, and people were surprised when I say that. It was very conservative. If you take the meaning of conservative in at face value, he wanted to conserve the rules of laws as they were, and he was very much against revolutions for sure, but even reformation, not only as a new theological system, but as a social enterprise of changing the law of the country you live in. And this is, of course, dictated in part by his experience of the wars of religions, which were so violent and deadly. And so at the same, actually it's very logical, the way he thinks about it is, since we're unsure, our human minds cannot know what is the best system of governments. They cannot know, God's will. So having any claim on that and launching an entire religious reformation when we're doing it from our very limited human mind can amount only to disorder with no gain in terms of truth value, since it's still coming from human reasoning. So it's better to stick to what we have, because we know all Political systems are relative or cultural systems are relative, but no one is better than the other. But in his chapter on customs, he adds at the very last minute something that's very kind of subversive, actually, but a little devious the way it's introduced. It says, so we should absolutely not change the laws, but the people who make the law should be able to govern the laws themselves and reform the laws. So there's this weird, dialectic where he's telling us, don't try to change the laws, live by the laws of your country. And at the same time, the governing authorities should be able to see when the laws themselves are not just any longer. And these authorities should have the authority to govern the laws themselves.
Well, Cécile, you have not digressed and you haven't contradicted yourself, but in spite of that, it's been very philosophical. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Our guest has been Cécile Alduy, professor of French literature and culture at Stanford, and author of The Politics of Love, Poetics and Genesis of the Amours in Renaissance France. And thank you, Lanier, so much for co-hosting with me today.
It has been my enormous pleasure.
We'll put links to everything we've mentioned today on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you can also become a subscriber and gain access to our library of more than 500 episodes.
And if you have a question that wasn't addressed in today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send it to us at comments@philosophytalk.org, and we may feature it on the blog.
Now, twice the digressions in half the time, it's Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes is the proper child of the Enlightenment. Montaigne invented the essay way back in the 16th century. He had been the rich son of a herring merchant, raised speaking only Latin, and then taught Greek as well. Think of it. He learned Greek in Latin. How do you even do that? Montaigne grew up to be a courtier and advisor, careers Machiavelli would have killed to have without controversy. Precisely on his 38th birthday, he retreated into his library tower, and thereafter only emerged occasionally, spending the rest of his life holed up writing essays. Essay, of course, means attempt, which shows the innovation Montaigne brought to writing. These weren't sermons, manifestos, broadsides, or ponderous orations. They were explorations of his own mind, and what that told us about being human. Never passionate, always reasonable. I think he may also have invented what we now call the Gallic shrug. What do I know was his catchphrase. The guy was an innovator. All the modern essay tropes are there. Writes about whatever he happens to be thinking about as he sits down to write. Full of anecdotes and observations, things he's read, things a guy said to him one time. He also throws in chunks of Latin and Greek as well. So reading Montaigne was a reward for being part of a vast information loop. No need to make a point. Just swim around in the ocean of received information. And at that time, still, he could know pretty much everything there was to know. And later, others could read his essays, skip over the Latin and Greek, and still feel like they're swimming. Culturally, this sudden permission to just write whatever pops into your head meant that the demands of persuasion and rhetoric do not apply. Just cluing you in, no convincing required, with a subject matter, whatever you felt like writing, had become a mighty tool in emerging democratic thought. Where the elitist doings of royals and eggheads were not so interesting unless they were earth-shatterers like Darwin, Freud, and Marx, leave morality to the bishops and preachers. We had magazines now, full of advertising, that is, persuasions to buy things wrapped around essays about this and that. Articles, feature writing, you had your Emersons, your Thoreaus, on up to Joan Didion, David Sedaris. Eventually, we got radio and television, the internet. For a while, we had newspaper columns up the wazoo. And I would place comedians among the heirs to Montaigne, one lone person standing up in front of 100 people, 1,000 trying to keep them interested in the trees and forest of your personal opinions on everything from traffic jams to hygiene. Toothbrushes, is it just me? The essay itself has seen better days. Who has time to read them? People check the thickness of the article. Too long, didn't read. Eye the width of the book in the bookshelf window. Check the index to see if their name is in it. Then decide to binge watch the 6-episode true crime thing on Netflix instead, even though they'd seen the same crime in Forensic Files 2 years ago. Now it's just a half hour. It doesn't make any sense. Now magazines are in trouble. People turn to websites, blogs, subscription sites like Medium, Substack. We had radio commentary for a century or so, My Little Home. Now podcasts reading everybody's lunch because for some reason, some people will even pay for those. Who knows how long anything will last? From simple truth seems beyond our grasp. Take a minor example. Mitch McConnell, upset that Coca-Cola disapproved of Georgia's new voting laws, warned that, quote, corporations will invite serious consequences if they become a vehicle for far-left mobs to hijack our country, unquote. But then he immediately said he did not want corporate donations to stop. Essay writer Jonathan Chait pointed out that what McConnell seemed to be saying is that corporate money is free speech, but corporate speech isn't. So we no longer even know what people are saying. Words like normalize become normalized, not to mention politicized. So what will we turn for the metaphors of tomorrow? Besides, metaphors are racist, I think. Problematic is a word. So would Montaigne be on Twitter if you were around today? No, he's more of an Instagram kind of guy, an influencer, you feel me? As he once said, if my mind could gain a firm footing, I would not make essays, I would make decisions. Put that in a manifesto and nail it to a church door. I dare you. I gotta go.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of KALW Local Public Radio San Francisco and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University. Copyright 2021.
Our executive producer is Tina Pamantuan.
The senior producer is Devin Strolovich. Laura McGuire is our director of research. And Cindy Prince-Baum is our director of marketing.
Thanks also to Merle Kessler and Angela Johnston.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from various groups at Stanford University and from the partners at our online community of thinkers.
The views expressed, or misexpressed, on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
Not even when they're true and reasonable. The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org, where you can subscribe to our library of more than 500 episodes. I'm Josh Landy.
And I'm Ray Briggs. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.
Montaigne said obsession was the wellspring of genius and madness. This is my obsession.